Hey guys, it's James and we're back with video 25 of this series. Today we are looking at SDY. It is SPDR's S&P Dividend ETF or Dividend Aristocrats ETF. So what we're going to do in this series, if this is the first video that you've seen, we're going to head over to the web page for today's ETF, and that ETF is SDY. We're going to see what that ETF is doing, what's the objective of the ETF, and how are they paying us a dividend yield. Then we'll head over to Seeking Alpha and look at some of the daily historical yield chart and come to a conclusion of a dividend yield that we would like to choose to be able to put into our calculator to give us an average number of how much SDY we need to own to pay us $1,000 a month. And then we'll compare SDY versus an S&P 500 index ETF. So let's get started. Today's ETF is SDY, SPDR's S&P Dividend ETF, and it's actually the Dividend Aristocrats. It follows the Dividend Aristocrats Index. This ETF seeks to provide investment results that, before fees and expenses, correspond generally to the total return performance of the S&P High Yield Dividend Aristocrats Index. The index screens for companies that have consistently increased their dividend for at least 20 consecutive years and weighs the stocks by yield. Due to the index screen for 20 years of consistently raising dividends, stocks included in the index have both capital growth and dividend income characteristics, as opposed to stocks that are pure yield. So what does that mean? What is actually in this ETF that is paying you this dividend yield? Over on Seeking Alpha's holdings breakdown page, you can see that for SDY, all 11 sectors are in this ETF with a little bit of cash held on the side, most likely for the dividend payout or for reinvestment back into these funds. And the top holdings are in the industrials, financials, consumer, defensive, and utilities sectors, with the top 3 to 4 sectors being close to 40 to 50% of the total ETF. Coming down here are just a few of the stocks in this ETF with a total of about 120 holdings. We have some very familiar names here: IBM, Walgreens, Exxon, and then you have things like Chevron and 3M as well, with not much of the one holding being higher weighted than the other. A very consistent, even weight throughout all of the stocks. So let's take a look at what their daily dividend yield is going to look like. You can see that it has been fairly erratic in the past 5 years. It looks like it jumped up here about 3 to 4 years ago, meaning there was probably a large payout. And then once that large payout passed that 12-month period, the payout started to consistently pay back down to a more average range of about 2.5. And then obviously in March of 2020, when the price of everything went down, the dividend yield artificially went up, but it looks like it has settled back out to around that 2.5 figure, with today the 12-month trailing yield being around 2.8%. So we'll go ahead and use 2.8% for our calculation to be able to find how much SDY we need to hold to hit $1,000 a month. Let's take a look first at their dividend payout history to see if it's been fairly consistent. And since that large payout, as we saw in the daily yield chart, there was that spike that artificially spiked the dividend yield to about, I believe it was 4 to 5%. And then over the course of the last 3 to 4 years, it's been fairly consistent, all the way from 55 cents all the way up to about 99 cents. Over on the calculator, we type in SDY for Portfolio 1, SPDR's S&P Dividend ETF. We came to a conclusion that 2.8% would be the dividend yield. We won't look at the expense ratio for now, but if we put in the expense ratio, it would calculate or reduce the amount of portfolio value we would have over the course of 10 years if we were to use this calculator for that purpose. But for today's purpose, we're just looking at the dividends per month, and all we need is that dividend yield figure. So for SDY, we would need around $428,000 to hit $1,000 a month, and $42,000 to $100 a month, and $2.1 million to hit $5,000 a month. So how does SDY compare versus the S&P 500 Index ETF? Well, if we come over to Portfolio Visualizer and take a long snapshot with $500,000 invested. Let's take first a look at reinvesting the dividends, SDY versus SPY, and SPY is the S&P 500 ETF, where SDY is holding funds from the S&P 500 that are high-yielding Dividend Aristocrat type of funds. And then the SPY is simply the S&P 500, where there's about 500 holdings of the top companies in the world. And then you have this SDY holding only around 120 holdings. Coming down to the portfolio growth chart, it goes back all the way to the most recent fund inception date, which is around November of 2005, with $500,000. These funds are very close. The S&P 500 tracks the Dividend Aristocrats ETF fairly closely, with the S&P 500 slightly coming out on top. Their cumulative annual growth rates with dividends reinvested is very close over the past 14 years or so. And you have 9% per year for SDY, 9.2% per year for SPY. Now, let's say you were looking for the dividends to not be reinvested and you wanted to draw the dividend. If you were to remove the dividend from the account, remember 2.8% for SDY, and for SPY, an S&P 500 ETF, it's around 1.5%. So you can see pulling out the dividends over the course of this time frame, the CAGR numbers are reduced from 9% down to 5% per year for SDY, and from 9.2% down to 7% for SPY. Coming down, taking a look at what those dividend payouts would have been over the course of this time period, you can see obviously that 2.8% is going to give you a little bit more than the SPY at that 1.5%, but over the course of the last few years, it looks like the payout was very similar. But do recall, you would have been holding more SPY at this time, so they would have been paying you out a little bit more. So that's the conclusion for this video for SDY, SPDR's S&P Dividend Aristocrat ETF. Let me know what you thought of this video. Smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for the 5 remainder videos of this series. And then I might take all of these and put them in one video. And with that, thanks for watching.